Who are you going to believe? MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, or your own lion eyes? Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle on the media circus that is the coverage of the coronavirus outbreak. Well, pandemic, I guess, would be the better word, but it sure doesn't feel like one if you're actually out there on the streets of America. We had the toilet paper shortage, of course. That'll self-correct here before too long. And there are some necessities that are harder to get. But overall, when I go out on the streets anyway, I see Americans and I see American businesses calmly going about doing the business of what needs to be done. Scott, let's start with you on this. When I see the TV news, and I try to avoid it as much as I can, but because of my job, I can't do that nearly as often as I'd like to. But the headlines are panicky. They're panic-inducing, or at least they seem to be trying to induce a panic that fortunately hasn't broken out. I think a panic would cause us far more damage than coronavirus is actually liable to do. And when I look at these two things, and I think of what our news media is supposed to do, and you, of course, are a professionally trained journalist. Where is the break? What went wrong? Why isn't our media reporting what we see with our own eyes?
It's sad to say, it's because they want people to read it. And we have become, our senses have become dulled to just factual information. We are looking for the extraordinary. I had a journalism professor, John Nichols at Penn State, who used to say, and I think he's probably quoting somebody famous, but he said, news is coups, earthquakes, and three-legged chickens. And basically, man, it's the extraordinary. It's not the mundane. And so if you merely came out with a headline each day that said, here's how many new cases of coronavirus there are. Here's how many people have recovered. This is the trajectory that it's on right now. Here's where the experts think it's going. And these are the common sense things you can do to stunt the growth of the pandemic. Then people wouldn't be as lathered up as they are. And frankly, they wouldn't be going to your news channel, your YouTube channel, your website, your newspaper, whatever it is. They wouldn't be as engaged and interested. I will tell you that on Saturday, I mean, I work at a retail furniture store. On Saturday, we were surprisingly crowded. It wasn't probably the biggest Saturday I've ever seen, but it was a good Saturday. It was a normal Saturday. By Monday, traffic had dropped off substantially, and I wound up near the end of the day being sent home early because just there frankly weren't very many customers in the store. Now, Monday is not as high a traffic day, but this was clearly different than the average Monday. And so while the people we had in the store were behaving as people normally do, and in addition adding some gallows humor about the coronavirus, you know, there weren't as many of them out there. I jokingly texted you during the course of the day, Steve, and said, hey, is there any way we can get some sort of social media viral campaign going that people need to start stockpiling sofas?
Yes, and I asked you if going viral was a too soon to use phrase.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know why it's toilet paper and not reclining chairs. I mean, it would benefit me a lot more if people were putting an extra sofa or two in their garage just in case they're not able to get them later. But in any case, I do think it's changed things. But I think that when people are out and about, in fact, it's amazed me that people would show up to the store and you ask them how you can help, and they go, "Oh, well, I'm just looking around. We're not going to buy anything." And I just think, really, in the middle of a pandemic, you go out to a place that's filled with utter strangers to wander around and touch things that other people have touched, and you don't have any goal? So ain't that America, you know?
Yeah, it really is. Bill, Scott raised an interesting point, and so this is going to be kind of a two-part question. He said that this hype, this panic mongering is this thing that the media has to do to get people to tune in, except by and large, we are tuning in less and less than we used to. So clearly that's not working. And I'd like you to address that. But the other point is the way they're covering the government response. Right now, we are far ahead of where China was at the same stage in their crisis. We have yet to approach anything like what's going on in Italy. I saw a story, I think, in the UK Sun that Britain may be facing a crisis, something like Italy here going down the road in a couple of weeks. And yet the media coverage of what's going on in Washington and even some of our state houses doesn't seem to match the reality of what we can actually see, the numbers that aren't being infected, the numbers that aren't dying.
Yeah, and you know, Steve, one of the statistics that you brought to the table that just completely eluded me, I think it was a week or two ago, when we talk about certainly the COVID virus is significantly more lethal than the regular flu, quite a bit more lethal. Yeah. But you pointed out that on a bad flu year, perhaps 14%, 15% of the population actually gets the flu.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, that was a huge year. That's this season. It's been a bad one.
So just to give you an idea of the level of the press bias here, the job of the press in a perfect world should be to inform the public and to do it in a responsible fashion. Now, when you're dealing with a pandemic, that means you need to impress people upon the seriousness and the urgency of this, because even if you take 0.1% of the population of the United States, get out your calculators, that's a lot of people. So they have a responsibility to make sure that people understand that this is serious, but I am not aware certainly that there is an absence or that the fear levels are too low. So in order to give people the information they need in order for them to make their own decisions about how to treat this. That's the job of the news media, is to provide you with information. They talk about the death has come to New York City, and you know, the 2 people have died in New York State or whatever. And I just dug into it, and one of them was a 65-year-old person with extremely significant health problems, and the other one was an 82-year-old woman with emphysema. Those 2 facts calmed me down, but they weren't presented at the top or anywhere near this thing. The numbers I'm going to quote now are from Johns Hopkins University, which is an unimpeachable source as far as I'm concerned. I will caveat this by saying that this information is probably 5 or 6 days old, but this is what came verbatim from Johns Hopkins University regarding the first 45,000 cases in China. It's gotten a lot bigger since then, but the first 45 cases in China, which we should not forget, half of the population smokes. The air pollution is terrible all over the country. Johns Hopkins, and I'm off on a percent or 2 of this, but not significantly, Johns Hopkins said that of all the cases in China, of the 45,000 cases that they had studied, 82 of them they considered mild, which meant no symptoms all the way up to slight congestion in the cough, you know, flu symptoms. 82% were considered mild, and of those first 45,000 cases in China, Johns Hopkins University said that the mortality rate among the mild cases was 0. In other words, every single person that came down with it with a mild version of it survived. They further went on to say that the second category was severe, and they described severe as shortness of breath, increased heart rate, perhaps sweating, distress. And I think the number was 14% of the cases were considered severe. And do you know what the survival rate of the severe cases was in China?
Do tell.
It was 100%. It was 100%. This is what Johns Hopkins University says. Now, if Johns Hopkins had said something different, I'd have a different opinion about this. When you get into the people that actually died, you find that they're elderly people. Most of them are in extremely bad shape already. And that's not to say for a second that we shouldn't be doing the social distancing, that we shouldn't be doing everything we're doing to slow it down. I think that despite the fact that no one's really been here before, that we are doing this very, very well. I think Donald Trump's willingness, because it's inconceivable that Barack Obama or anybody else would have done something like talk to the heads of Target, Walmart, or so on, places with huge parking lots that are used to dealing with masses of people at any given time, and saying you can just pull up to the front of this and get your test kit, not at the DMV, where the lines are already horrible, but would be incalculable now. This kind of thing is gonna be ending up being data, Steve, and the data is going to reflect, I think, very, very well on us for a number of reasons. Just a little simple piece of math to give you just some kind of idea of how different this same virus is behaving in different places in the world based on different social systems. the population of Italy, let me turn that around. China has 24 times more people than Italy does. That means if you have 2 Italians, you have 48 Chinese, right? So 2 Italians for 48 Chinese. If you have 2 dead Italians from COVID-19, you have 3 dead Chinese. See the difference there?
Yeah, Italy's in bad shape.
Yes, they're in bad shape. And this is not trying to score political points. The reason I bring this up is not only because I don't want it to happen here, but also I think that the people of Italy deserved a system that treated them like human beings rather than like cogs in the big government machine, which is never funded enough. And when you look at those kind of numbers, and when you look at what South Korea is doing and what Donald Trump has done with the free market, we are going to come out of this with actual, genuine data. But of all the things, I'll tell you right now, I would be absolutely amazed, not from an emotional point of view, just from the facts that I've read. I would be amazed if there was one case in America doing this where people said, we simply can't treat you, go home and die. I just don't think that sentence is going to be uttered in this country. I just don't. But the final thing I would like to say about this is this. When all of this panic buying started several days ago, it annoyed me because I didn't think it was necessary. But on reflection, what I'm finding from being out on the street, which is the entire purpose of this episode, it's your entire theme. What I found from being out on the street is that people are not only not acting fearful, they're not acting mean. In Los Angeles, which I wouldn't describe as exactly the most polite city in all of America, people are being actively cheerful. They're making an effort to be cheerful. You can see it. Everybody's being as friendly as they can. And that made me realize that this panic buying, this mass buying of things was not due to the fact that they were in mortal terror, but more like the fact that they simply didn't know what was coming, and this seemed like a prudent thing to do. And in reflection, that doesn't seem like such an unreasonable thing to me. But the thing that I would take out of what we're seeing so far at this point on the streets of America is how unbelievably civil, decent, friendly, helpful, kind, average American citizens are to each other. It seems to me that no matter how much they try to scare people, everybody that I've run into in this country, and I haven't seen any exceptions of it because if I had, I'd see it on the news, everybody in this country is taking this like champions. Whether they're more afraid than they should be based on facts, that's based on where they get their information and how much they get. But I have yet to see a single person doing anything like elbowing somebody out of the way, to get to the last roll of toilet paper in the place. I think when this thing's said and done, we're going to come out of this a much healthier society, and I think we're going to come out of it a much more unified society because, Steve, this is, for many, many Americans, this is the first bad thing that's ever happened. I mean, society-wise. The last thing of this scale that happened was 9/11, and that was a shock to the system. That was a total of 3,000 Americans killed. The number of people killed from COVID-19 is going to be higher than that. But,
and it's all, sorry.
Yeah. Within the box of the people that are going to be at real risk for this. But I think that we're going to come out of this, better. We're going to come out of this prouder. We're going to come out of this more united, I think. We're going to come out of this less afraid than we went into it. And all of this goes back to this feeling I've had for several days now, that the way perhaps to look at this historically in the long term is to look at the COVID-19 outbreak as kind of a drill, like a drill, an exercise. We are learning things that we've never had to deal with before, ever. We've never had to deal with these things before, ever. And we're learning them with a disease that is, compared to what other pandemics have been, quite mild. And when we come out of this, it is like a vaccination for the country, because the next time there's a pandemic outbreak, and there will be one, we not only will have a better idea of what to do, and we'll not only be prepared in ways that we aren't prepared for this one, but we will have had the unbelievable advantage of having been through something like this before. We're going to know what it looks like. We're going to know what 2 months of self-isolation looks like, because we'll have been through it. And that is how an immune system fights the disease. It doesn't have to refight the thing from the beginning. It learns. It learns from previous exposure. And I think the whole world will learn a great deal from this. And again, with the deepest respect for the people who we are losing and are going to lose to this, on a scale of something like yellow fever or plague or Ebola, we are going to come out of this a lot healthier than we went into it. And the price we're going to pay for it is going to be quite a bargain price. If you look at the population of the world, that's no consolation to somebody who loses a loved one. Doesn't matter if they die of Ebola or hit by a truck. There's no consolation, and I don't mean any callousness about that. I'm looking at it from a global point of view. But nevertheless, one of the many things that'll be healthier is that we're going to have even less confidence in the people that claim to be telling us the news.
Yeah, about that. I don't care what your political affiliation or beliefs or any of that stuff is. We are a much better people than our chattering class is, or that they give us credit for. And it's wonderful. It's heartening to see that as I go out in the world day to day. And I'm still going out in the world, just maybe not quite as close. That said, I ran some numbers last week, and a worst case scenario is we could lose 600,000 people in this country. That's not likely at all, because we're doing the thing that I said we should do from the start. We're treating it seriously, not hysterically. Now, the press is being hysterical, but we mostly turn that off. But we are treating it seriously. We're treating it seriously as people who are self-isolating and maintaining our social distance. We're treating it seriously as a government that is shutting down big gatherings and all the rest. And that's the federal government and our state governments too. It may seem like an overreaction, but let me give you a historical example that tells me that this is not an overreaction. On December 16, 1944, Hitler launched the Ardennes counteroffensive, what we call the Battle of the Bulge here in the English-speaking world. And it was his last-ditch effort to repeat what he'd pulled off in 1940, which was to punch a hole between the British and French armies, roll up their flanks, seize the Channel coast, and take all of France as a result. He was trying to do it again against the British and American armies in December of 1944. And when Eisenhower got word that the Germans had broken through our lines, he actually remained very calm. His attitude was it mattered much less how far the Germans got through our lines than how wide the breach was, what he called the shoulders. And there was a northern shoulder and a southern shoulder, and the bulge came out in between the two. Eisenhower figured that if he could keep the shoulders narrow, that there would be a limited number of troops and supplies that the Germans could push through that breach. And then the rest, after you close the shoulders back up, would mostly be a mopping up operation. Problem solved. Now, it was the largest land battle we fought in World War II, and we lost more people than we lost in any other battle. But Eisenhower was right. You keep the shoulders narrow, and that limits the damage that can be done. We have something similar with coronavirus, except instead of a breach in the lines of the military lines, what we have is the growth curve of the virus. And if you can keep that growth curve small, just like you keep those shoulders narrow at the Battle of the Bulge, that limits how seriously you have to treat it later. You limit that growth curve, you limit exposure, and we were doing all the right things right now to limit that growth curve. We're treating it seriously, not hysterically. We're doing exactly what we should. So you keep doing exactly what you should, which is to stay calm, keep a solid head on your shoulders, maintain your distance, and I think we're going to get through this mostly just fine. That's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like shows like this, please click on over, become a member. We would love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.